Now, Kolinsky Sable brushes are widely considered to be amongst some of the very best when it comes to painting detail on miniatures. But can a handmade, synthetic, vegan-friendly paintbrush, especially one that costs less than a cup of coffee, really stand up to the mighty Kolinsky Sable? Well, I was very dubious as well. But you may remember that about 6 months ago I found and then bought some of the Red Dot collection from Rosemary and Co. Now these are the pointed round brushes, and they're basically the same shape as the Kolinsky Sable ones. Now I did a full kind of review and initial findings on this video up in the top of your screen right now. If you haven't seen it yet, it's probably worth checking out. Now, following on from that video, I got a great question down in the comments from Hugh, who was asking how those red dots were kind of standing up to prolonged use. Were they splitting, or were they getting kind of the hooked tips that is really common amongst synthetic brushes? Now, I've been using and abusing these red dot collection brushes for about 6 months now. And when I say using and abusing, I have used them for everything. I have used them for acrylics, I've used them for enamels, I've also used them for oils in places as well. As far as cleaning and maintenance goes, I haven't done anything particularly special, and like any of my brushes, I've used the Masters brush cleaner and preserver. And also I've stored them horizontally so you don't get water and stuff stuck down in the ferrule. I've also kept the little plastic tube caps on the end of the brush to try and help protect the bristles. Now, my workhorse brushes for the last year or so have been the Rosemary and Co Series 33. Now these are the handmade but still very competitively priced Kolinsky Sable brushes. Now, I've been using these particular brushes for over a year and they're still very, very good. But how do the Red Dots series really kind of stand up after 6 months of heavy use? Now these 3 brushes are the ones I've been testing from the Rosemary and Co Red Dot series. So I have 3 different sizes, a larger one moving through down to a much smaller, very fine detail brush. Now the first thing I'm looking for is staining, because synthetic bristles do have a habit of taking on the colour of the paint that you've been using them with. But these brushes, give them their dues, there is minimal staining on any of these. The next thing I'm looking at is the shape of the brush when it's dry. So when it hasn't got fluid in the bristles to help it maintain its shape. Now if you look at the 2 larger brushes, whilst you don't have lots of stray hairs splitting off, there is some wear evident at the very tip. The tips of the bristles are starting to split a little bit. Not dramatically so you can't use it anymore, but there is definitely some wear and tear there. And you've definitely lost that really nice sharp point. However, on the really small fine brush, this is still looking pretty good. There's still minimal damage there, there's minimal damage to the bristles, and it's still holding that very nice sharp point. So yes, it does appear that the bigger bristles do wear a little quicker than the finer bristles. However, this could also be affected by how I've been using them. So for example, with the bigger brushes, I may have used them more with slightly more aggressive paints like enamels than I did with the very tiny detail brushes, which I would have been using with much less paint and more likely to be using acrylics and maybe oils instead, but in smaller quantities. Okay, so let's wet these brushes in some nice clean water and see how they reshape. So after wetting and reshaping these brushes, the small one is still nice and sharp, but the 2 bigger ones, there's definite improvement there. You've definitely got the shape of the brush has come back. There's a little bit of hooking at the end of the brushes. On the largest brush it's more pronounced, but it's still fairly minimal. It's probably not enough to stop you doing like base coating and that sort of thing. So it's still usable, but you would have to take that into account when trying to do some more detailed and finer work. Okay, so in conclusion, and also point to note that this video is not sponsored. I bought these brushes and I've tested them, and this is my personal findings. Now to put all this into context, let's remember that these brushes are handmade, these brushes are synthetic, and all the components are 100% vegan friendly. And also bear in mind that these cost literally half of what an already very competitively priced Series 33 Kolinsky Sable is. Now first of all, a caveat. Now the first of these is the sample size. Now whilst I have put these brushes through the works, I've only tested these 3 brushes, and I've only tested them for 6 months of use. But my experience using these brushes is that the sharp tip lasts longer in the smaller sizes, and you do tend to get a little bit of fraying, a little bit of hooking in the larger sizes. But to be fair, this is quite standard amongst synthetic brushes anyway. Now for me personally, I find that the Kolinsky Sable wears a lot better than the red dot. But that is a natural bristle compared to a synthetic one. However, being objective and kind of being fair to it, the red dot bristles, whilst they have broken down and hooked a little bit, especially in the larger sizes, they've still lasted longer than a lot of the other branded synthetic brushes I've tried in the past. So it really is a case of swings and roundabouts, which you will need to balance out in your own head for your own personal circumstances. But do bear in mind that the red dot series covers a whole range of different brush shapes, types and sizes. It's not just the pointed rounds which we've tested so far. Based on my experience with these brushes, I would say that the red dot is a pretty solid synthetic brush that has a good price to performance ratio. Now if these brushes do sound good for you, then I've put some links down in the description for you. Now the links are affiliate links, which means if you do buy something via that link, then it helps to support the work I'm doing with the channel. Also, you'll find all the details along with everything else that I've reviewed on flyingravenstudios.com. So I hope you found that useful, and if you have any other questions, please let me know down in the comments. And I'll see you on the next project.